pre-made, it's like easier.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I like these. The chocolate's good, and I figured out I only like vanilla in my coffee.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
but the strawberry, I haven't tried the strawberry, but the like all three of the flavors are good.
They're so dang expensive.
Those are so expensive. I think these are like cheaper. For the 5 minutes. I know, and I have them on pretty as I was packing. Great, it's still in for my cup, and I was. That's like $3, dude.
We're waiting for the man behind the curtain back there to finish up with the preparations, so we'll get going here in just a second or two. Welcome, everyone, and welcome to the first meeting of our new fiscal year. I know everyone's really excited to have that happen. I know we always are here, and thanks to the state, it's always a bit of a mystery because we don't really even get our numbers until August, even though we're actually operating on that new budget that we don't even really have. So anyway, but that's a funny thing in state law. Both the mayor and the deputy mayor are not with us this evening, so you get me, and I apologize for that. My mayoral skills might be a little bit dusty, so I apologize for any errors, omissions, or miscues as we get started here. So, first item, as it always is our Pledge of Allegiance. And Dakota, how about you tonight? As long as you're kind of as close to the front row as anybody can be. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item tonight is our Pledge of Allegiance, which we just did, and then communications from public. This is time for the public to come up and speak to us about anything that's on their mind that's not a public hearing as advertised. Name and address for the record, please, Dakota, even though we know who you are.
Good evening, council, and your new deputy mayor.
Yes, yeah, that's his third string, and that's it. Yeah, we went way down the bench.
Testing. So my comment tonight is in regards to the Community Development Board and the growth policy process more broadly. So I'm here to urge the council to take stronger action on the Community Development Board and their demonstrated behavior that we have seen recently. Unlike everyone here on the dais, I am not a homeowner, and I do not have the privilege of having economic security in this town, regardless of how the growth policy is written. And so my future and the future of the vast majority of the workers in Whitefish, the few that still live and work here, is on the line. This is far too important and consequential of a document to take a tepid approach on. 4 members of the board demonstrated flagrant disregard for city staff expertise and the input from the public in regards to the economic development chapter. I can't talk. Instead of listening to city staff's expertise, they adopted wholesale edits from Heart of Whitefish, which you know is a local special interest group with no public-facing information, And despite this, all I really saw from council was finger wagging and not a lot of substantive disciplinary actions taken. And I get really animated about this because I am a person whose future most likely depends on how this document is written and how this process plays out. And so I ask the council, this is a genuine question, why does this group get a free pass to butcher this process? It's something I genuinely don't understand. It seems to me that there's city staff on the cusp of quitting because of the behavior of this group. And Steve, you had to step down from that board, which is a shame because I thought you were doing an excellent job. I feel like I would like to remind the council that you guys are the ones in charge here, not them. And I don't understand kind of this endless leeway that this group seems to be getting when they have shown in the past that they will not listen to you guys. It seems clear to me that a majority of the Community Development Board has a deeply regressive, outdated, and out-of-touch idea about urban planning and are not qualified to facilitate the development of this document. Their wholesale adoption of edits from the aforementioned special interest group, some of which they didn't even read, by the way, just to be very clear about that, shows a flagrant disregard for public input and the will of the people. I'm urging the council to please do something and take action because I think we've seen they will not listen to you on this matter unless there are consequences. As a young person in Whitefish who is not a homeowner, this is kind of the last grasp for me to be able to live here. I've been touring apartments in Kalispell recently because it kind of feels like at times there's no hope if you're a worker in Whitefish when you see people like that in charge and flagrantly disregarding the needs of the community, and then no action is really taken against them. And as a young person in Whitefish, I have heard endlessly, and I mean endlessly, about how we need experience on these boards. And I feel like we've tried experience with this Community Development Board and it's not working. I suggest that instead of focusing on experience, we start focusing on results and the merits of ideas, not simply how old someone is or how long they've been in the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Dakota. Any other public comment? Michelle, anyone online?
For those of you, just to remind you that Giuseppe is attending virtually. You can't see him, but he's here. Anybody who's online, if you'd like to address the council for anything that is not advertised as a public hearing, please unmute your mic. We're good?
Next item then is communications from our volunteer boards. Any volunteer board, either audience or council? Hearing none, takes us on to the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All's in favor? Chair votes, and that does carry unanimous. Giuseppe? Oh. Giuseppe?
He votes in favor.
Votes in favor? Thank you, Giuseppe. So, he's the silent minority out there tonight. First, next item is public hearings, and would be our ordinance number 25-07, which is an ordinance amending zoning regulations Title 11, Section 11-2J2, WB1 District, 11-2L2 WB3 District, 11-2-9 definitions, and creating a new section 11-3-44 formula business standards of the Whitefish City Code, first reading, and that would be our zoning text amendment 25-02.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and the rest of the council. A couple months ago, we brought to you guys the idea of potentially modifying our formula business regulations within the city code, and you guys directed us to bring expediently some changes forward to you guys. And so this draft text amendment proposes revising the definition of formula retail, rebranding it as formula business so we can broaden the types of businesses that are included in that. And then we're also adding a whole new section in our chapter 3, or 11-3, which is our special provisions chapter, that would outline more detail on what formula retail is and provide us some intent and background in case we ever were to get sued or something on that we actually have something in there that explains why we have it in our code, which we never have had in the past. And then there's some minor changes that we have to make to the WB1 and the WB3 districts in order to add that word formula business instead of formula retail. So that new section 11.344, it provides specific development standards for formula businesses. As I mentioned, it adds an intent section stating that the reason why is it ties into the growth policy, helps protect the downtown and other commercial areas by supporting unique local businesses. And then it would broaden the definition of formula business to include other types of formula things, such as bars and lounges, check cashing outlets, and payday loan franchises. We don't have any of those in our town, but right now the downtown allows those businesses. And since they're not a retail business, you know, a check cashing outlet that you see all over the country could open up on Central Avenue, for instance. Equipment and gear rentals, gyms and fitness studios, non-auto vehicle sales and rentals, which would include scooters and e-bikes. So basically, by changing this, we would not allow the certain types of e-bikes or scooters that are seen nationwide in our downtown. Personal services, including salons, would be added. We already include restaurants, but we're just adding that into the definition. And then retail sales, which we already add, but we're exempting fuel sales because you're not going to ever have a fuel sale that's not a formula. And pharmacies and marijuana dispensaries. And then exempted from those things, because some of those are professional services. So with the exception of the payday outlets, which I mentioned, financial services are exempt, investment, real estate, legal assistance, insurance, healthcare, title agencies, and other similar professional services. A lot of those are tied into certain franchises. They would be exempt from our restrictions. We're also adding a requirement for an economic impact study for any formula retail or hotel that's over 10,000 square feet. These are the types of uses that would be in our our WB2 zoning district, which is where we steer all of the formula types of businesses currently. And then we refer to the architectural review standards and the requirement that formula businesses can't use traditional building designs or color schemes. And then the revision to the definition of formula retail, we're rebranding it as formula business, changing that term from formula retail to formula business. And then we're reducing the number of similar businesses that would meet that criteria to be considered that from 12 down to 10. Just in researching nationwide where different municipalities and other places have regulated them. There's several of them that have that number at 10, so that seems reasonable to reduce that. But we also are reducing the number of standardized items to be considered that from 2 down to 1, and so that's going to capture any of the businesses that are trying to modify certain things and not be considered that, to sort of use a loophole to get around our regulations. And then, we regulate formula retail and talk about types of products that are sold, but we don't mention menu items, and that's something when it comes to restaurants. So we added the terms menu and services to that definition. And then we included a standardized logo or business name and not just standardized trademark or service mark in case someone has a name that has never been, trademarked. And then, as I mentioned, there's a few minor changes in the B1 and B3. And one of the things that we're adding is in the WB3 zone, a restriction on formula hotels, where we do, in the past, any kind of hotel was allowed downtown. Last year, when we did some changes, we added hotels to the conditional uses in the B3 downtown, and this would basically regulate any formula hotel similar to any other formula business. Note that there's no changes to the B2. Again, that's where we steer all those types of businesses, and just as a reminder, we have a lot of formula retail and restaurants in that zoning district, and we're not proposing to regulate those any further or put more restrictions on them, but Dairy Queen, Fast Signs, Budget, Super One, Napa, Safeway, Walgreens, McDonald's, Marriott, Ace Hardware, Best Western, Prudential, Edward Jones, Town Pump, the UPS Store, Glacier Bank, Subway, Stockman Bank, Starbucks. All of our formula things are in the B2, and they'll remain in that district. So in looking at how this ties in with the growth policy in the 2007, which is our currently active growth policy, we do have a goal that says research regulatory amendments to discourage and prohibit formula businesses from locating in the downtown area. And so that our finding one, it does support the growth policy. It does promote compatible urban growth in order to promote unique local businesses and help Whitefish maintain its unique character and business environment. It does look at the character of the district and its suitability. We're looking at where farmland businesses should be and where they shouldn't be. Help maintain the character of the city's commercial zoning districts by prohibiting downtown, restricting them in other areas. And then generally all the other findings do meet our criteria. Staff did recommend approval of this. It did go to the Community Development Board on June 19th. Initially, there was a motion made by Heberling and seconded by Worcester to deny the text amendment. After discussion with staff, they did withdraw that, and then Toby Scott and Scott Worcester made a motion to recommend approval of it, and that was approved unanimously. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Taylor? Ben?
All right, let me start with a big picture question here. So I'll preface this by saying I'm always slightly wary of conditional uses because I'm acutely aware of how difficult it can actually be for the council to turn those down. My question is, like, let's say as a theoretical, TGI Fridays wished to open a restaurant in downtown. On what basis would the council be able to turn down that conditional use application?
Well, in the B3 zone, that would not be a permitted use at all. So that would not even come to you guys. We would just tell them, sorry, you can't operate in the downtown. You know, happy to go locate in the WB2. However, that business is a conditional use in the B2 zone, so then they would have to apply to the council and review that. And I mean, on what basis could you deny that? I mean, I think out there where there's other formula businesses, McDonald's, Dairy Queen, it'd be difficult to come up with reasons to deny it. You know, other areas where, you know, might be more impactful to local businesses, you maybe have more reasons. You may have to look at other things like traffic and stuff like that.
I mean, what conditions would we be even reviewing, I guess, in the, of any of them as a conditional use application for a formula business? What conditions would we be even considering relating to its formulaic nature? You
know, you'd have to look at impacts. I mean, one of the things that we're looking at for the larger types of businesses is like an economic impact. Like, how does their business impact the other businesses in Whitefish? You know, if a larger retail store wanted to operate, you know, and get a conditional use permit, and they're, you know, the B2 does restrict the types of retail that can be done, but potentially something could come in. You know, the mall does allow all types of, you know, they're grandfathered in, so something like, you know, some kind of a larger type of store could come in there, but, you know, you give this council an opportunity to review the pros and cons of it, and there may be some conditions that could be put on there, and, you know, you guys do have the right to make a decision for what's best for the community, and as we saw with, you know, the hotel that the conditional use permit you guys denied, that, you know, the Supreme Court upheld that, and, you know, you do have to have some reasons, you know, traffic impacts or financial impacts or things like that. But I mean, it is going to be a case-by-case basis depending on the type of use and where they're looking to locate.
Okay. I mean, has it ever been considered that maybe the B1 district, for example, maybe doesn't need formula businesses in it?
I mean, again, that's a policy decision. You know, that district has allowed all retail sales and services. It's the same as the downtown, but they're limited in size. You know, there's a maximum of 40,000 square feet for a business in that district. So, and in the past, I mean, it's just a few years ago that we added formula restrictions in that district. You know, in the past they were allowed, we just haven't had any. So I think it was, yeah, probably 3 years ago that we even included, you know, a restriction on formula and made it something that would require a conditional use rather than just be a use by right.
My next question is, you've got in the new text, you have a list of businesses that are included. For the purposes of the section, a retail sales or service business or establishment includes the following uses, and it has the list of uses. And then it has a list of things that are exempt. Sorry if this is just a wordsmithing thing, but should it say includes but is not limited to, or something that makes it broader than, like, where do you, if something's not in either A or B, what happens to it?
Well, that's a fair point. It could say, you know, the following types of uses, but not limited to. Under B it says or other similar professional services. So I mean, it broadens that section. These are very specific things, but I mean, if there was a question about something where it fit in, I guess you could broaden it so that there was some discretion there.
So is there any sense in doing an amendment to change it to say includes but is not limited to? Angie's nodding her head, yes.
I guess that's a question for Angie, because if it's not limited to, I think it would have to be something similar to these, very similar to that type of business, and not just have it broad-ended where we can pick and choose which ones could apply that to, right?
Yeah, I think it should be, by default, they're not allowed except for those specific things, not the other way around.
That list under A is a list of things that we would look at as a formula business. In the past, it was just retail and restaurants. And so now we're adding, bars and lounges. Is that a retail use? I don't know. And then, equipment rentals. We had the black tie ski rentals that came in downtown. A lot of people were like, how come you let that in there? Well, it wasn't a retail use. It's what we call a service use. And so it wasn't captured under that. With this, that type of use would be included as a formula business, just as an example. But I'm okay with adding some language that might say the retail is, includes the following uses or similar uses where they're functioning as a principal or accessory use.
Okay. And then my last question is, you briefly touched on this, but one of the new provisions here has to do with an economic impact study. And that was an interesting thing. And so I guess maybe could you expand a little bit on what that is doing and how that informs our decision making, or would inform our decision making?
It's something that I've seen in other communities, and it's kind of like doing a traffic study. When a new business goes in, and when you do an economic impact study, it looks at, if there's a type of business that's going in that would directly compete with some of the unique businesses in the downtown and potentially, impact them. Just as an example, when I worked in Ketchikan, Alaska, they had a Walmart come into town. Well, in their downtown, and it was located outside of town, but in their downtown, they had a number of types of stores that sold things that Walmart does, and, Walmart put them all out of business, out the shoe store, the clothing store. They just couldn't compete with that. And so this would give an opportunity when it's, something like that were to try to come in, whether they could or not, I don't know, but to be able to look at the impact of that and give you guys a basis and a reason to deny, if it was going to severely impact the economic health of Whitefish.
Is that a reason we can deny an application for something like that?
I think it could be, yeah. That's one of the reasons to have that study done.
What's that?
If it negatively impacts the community, yeah, that would be a reason, that would be a condition that's not being met.
I hope. Okay.
Well, and and Ben, just to kind of touch on your point about worrying about lawsuits, I think if you open up A to say, but not limited to, I think that gives us more broadside to a lawsuit if it's not something that's already listed in that list. And this greatly expands what we can control compared to what we can currently. This list does. And it's pretty comprehensive, I think. I can't think of other formulaic businesses out there. So anyway,
Sure.
just my 2 cents. I do have a couple questions,
Yeah, I'm
though.
done. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, Ben.
Steve?
Yeah, Dave, what about, do we have any sort of mechanism that if we get a business that comes in and say they have 5 establishments now, and then they go over, then 5 years from now, they have 25 of these businesses across the country, and it's clear that they are, now that they're, they've branded themselves as a formula business. Does the part about standardized logo, does that cover that to help us
Well,
prevent
if they
that from
came
coming
in and they were, like Mackenzie River's an example, they didn't qualify as a formula business when they opened in Whitefish. Now they are. There are locations all over the place, but this, the ones here is grandfathered in as one of the original ones. It's not like we can tell them to close and go away. Now that they're a formula business, they're grandfathered in, so.
But if we're talking about a conditional use in the B2 zone, is there any leverage for us in terms of pulling their permit after they've gone beyond a certain number of stores, for example? Or a business kind of like Kimosabe that came in.
Yeah, I mean, there's only 3 of those, or I think, or 4,
There's 5 or 6 of them, but yeah,
I mean, they don't qualify as our formula. I mean, but
they don't now. But obviously their intent is to grow.
yeah, I mean,
So-
once they got over 15, once we allow one in there, not like we can
Nothing we
revoke
can
their
do.
permit.
Okay, that was just
That's
my
just-
question. There's nothing we can do if they grow and expand into the next Walmart or whatever. Okay, thank you.
Rebecca?
So Dave, with the economic impact study, the person that wants to come here and build a business pays for that?
Yeah, it would be up to them to have, basically pay a professional to do a study.
So it would-
'cause
is
something
there
like
any-
that would, could cost $20,000-$30,000. The city's not going to be on the hook for that.
And
We would
then
require
what
them
type
to
of
do that.
professional prepares it? A planner or
Or an
ec-
economic consultant, I mean, there's professional economists out there that look at stuff like that.
And there's no way they would be biased towards the person paying their bill?
Well, I mean, anybody that pays for a study, their client's going to come first. But on the flip side, we'd have the opportunity to review that. We could hire somebody to review it and give us feedback on that if we wanted to spend the money on that, if we were particularly concerned about something. But,
Well,
it
just
just
I've
depends
seen
on
it
how much money
sometimes
that we
with the
have. as a city. What's
transport.
that?
Just thinking of the transportation studies, I know the people that do them are excellent, but I've never seen them recommend not moving forward with a project because they're hired to basically make a project happen by the developer or whoever's building. So I'm just wondering how we avoid a bias towards something, but
I mean,
what
a
you're
lot of a
saying
traffic impact study is really based on engineering and science, like how many vehicle trips, how's that going to impact an existing intersection, what's the level of service at that intersection currently, and then you add more trips. I mean, in economic things, there's numbers to back up whatever their findings are, and we'll have an opportunity to review those things. It's not just,
I think when we did the Wisconsin Avenue corridor plan, we did have, the planners hired an economic consultant. It was really helpful. I just haven't seen it other than that used in our town, so I just wanted to know how it worked and where they came from. And then one other question is the 12 locations to 10 locations kind of subjective, or is that a planning standard? Because it still
Well-
seems like quite a few franchises.
I mean, I reviewed, there's not a ton of communities that do restrict these nationwide. There are, a few. There's a few that have been legally challenged that are out there.
Oh.
It seemed like a reasonable reduction based on, there's a few other places that use 10. There's some that use 12. That's basically where I wanted to reduce it somewhat, but I had to come up with something that was at least reasonable.
But not 5. Like it has to be a number
And you guys could pick a number. And that'd be up to.
Well, you're the planner, though. We don't know about that stuff. And then the last thing is I went to the Sustainable Tourism Management Plan update, and people brought up the concept of pop-up stores downtown for empty storefronts. And I don't know if that would fit in here, or should we bring it up a different way, or is it possible with this update or not? Like, and I
You know, we
didn't
had
know.
that question come up, whether like Lululemon could do a pop-up store in another business, and we had to tell them no. In the downtown, I mean, there's other places they could have done it in the community, but not in our downtown. You know, there's stores, if you have a store and you want to sell Lululemon products, great, but if you're branding yourself as a Lululemon store, then you would not be able to.
What if it was like someone that had a food truck and then wanted to set something up for the summertime and they weren't franchised? Do we have a mechanism currently for that?
Not currently, if it, you know, it's a formula retail thing. I mean, I don't know how you would establish that. If like a McDonald's wanted to do a food truck at 38 Central, you know, I don't know.
All right. Well,
I don't foresee them doing that, but
it doesn't sound like we should change this. I just wanted to let you know that some of the people downtown were considering bringing it to the city, and so I thought I'd bring it up now just to see if it was already taken care of. But all right, thank you.
Further questions? If not, public hearing has been. Oh, Giuseppe, sorry. Oh, you're there. There you are.
Giuseppe, we can't hear you.
Oh, I'm not muted. I'm not muted at all. Let me see. Can you hear me now? No? That's strange. That's strange.
IT is working on it. Hold on. Giuseppe.
Okay. Okay.
Can you try it again, please, Giuseppe?
Yes, can you hear me now? Hello?
Still can't hear you.
I do not know. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks for bearing with us. Right now is the good time for us to figure this out because we have the consultants with us back there with Jake. So thank you for your patience.
No worries.
Can you try it one more time, Giuseppe? Sorry.
Absolutely, I can try. Can you hear me now? No? I can speak. Hello, hello? Hello?
So Giuseppe, we're going to go ahead and hold the public hearing, hold your question. They're going to work on it while we're doing that. I don't see anybody out here that's going to speak to it, so I don't know how much time that's actually going to buy us. But a public hearing has been advertised and it is required, and we're going to go ahead and open that right now. Is there anyone, if you're not visiting us electronically, that would like to speak to this? Well, that didn't get us much time, did it? Hearing and seeing no one, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time and try and read Giuseppe's lips as best as we can. But I just, as long as we're kind of pausing here, one of the things kind of in reference to Rebecca's question, it was one I had to myself today about the economic impact analysis. Seems to me we want to put some sidebars on that. So, and we would have specifics in there, by example, number of businesses you would directly compete with, their names, number of employees, kinds of products they sell, how you would compete with them. I don't want them to just come and say, oh, now you can buy cheap underwear in town. We're the greatest thing since Cracker Jacks. So it seems like that would be something pretty easy. That wouldn't necessarily have to go into here, but would be, you know, something you would give an applicant when they came in. It's like, here's our list of what you need to touch base on. So
That makes sense.
Can I make a motion and then maybe we'll get Giuseppe sorted out, or no? Would you rather wait?
what do you think, Giuseppe? Nod if you think, can we get a motion and kind of get moving here?
Can I make a motion, Giuseppe, or you okay?
Yeah,
All
okay,
right.
thank you.
He does have something written up here. It just came up.
Okay,
So his question is, why exempting some and not others? Salons are not allowed, but investment firms are.
I think, well, because, you know, within the code right now, you know, financial services are permitted in downtown. Banks, most banks are part of what we would consider a franchise. And so an investment firm, D.A. Davidson, Merrill Lynch, I mean, all those things are very common. It's very hard to find a firm like that isn't a franchise. And so we're just exempting those in general. When it comes to things like salons, you know, most of the ones that we have are, you know, locally owned salons in the downtown. There's a place for formula salons. Well, not really, actually, because we don't allow salons in the B2, but it could potentially operate in the B1 zone with a conditional use permit. But so, yeah, I mean, it was just generally the types of businesses that we're trying to formulate, you know, and welcome local, unique businesses in our downtown zone is the main thing. But you know, obviously financial services and other types of professional services aren't directly competing, you know, with the retail space on Central Avenue, for instance. That's the reasoning.
did you get all that, Giuseppe?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, okay.
He said salons are just an example, and then he said, so we could have the whole Central with Relax.
Remax.
Oh.
Remax.
Real estate?
Real estate?
Remax?
Remix.
Yes.
I don't know. Sorry, Giuseppe.
Yeah, I know.
Remax.
Remax.
Dana knew what you were throwing down. I wasn't.
Yeah, we do restrict professional offices from being in storefronts on Central Avenue. So technically we would not allow Remax all the way down Central Avenue.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 25-07, an ordinance amending the zoning regulations to Title 11.
It's been moved by Councilor Cannell and seconded by Councilor Davis to approve ordinance 25-07, and that would be on a first reading. Discussion.
Sure, go ahead.
For a friendly amendment,
You bet.
I would move to change the language of section A and the new text part of this to read where it says, a retail sales or service business or establishment includes the following uses. I would change it to say includes but is not limited to the following uses.
Is there a second to the friendly?
I'll second it.
Rebecca? Discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote on that. Everyone in favor? That does carry unanimously. Takes us back to the original motion as amended. Yeah, I did say unanimously. And I assumed that he was voting, so. Further discussion on the original motion as amended? All those in favor? Motion does carry unanimously. Takes us then on to item number 7, which is Dana's written report.
Good evening, Council. You have my manager's report in your packet. I hope you've had some time to review it. Just wanted to point out the Flathead County's education campaign has kicked off for the upcoming November election to fund a replacement jail. I had the opportunity to tour the jail, and I can see why that facility is in desperate need of updating. If you are interested in a tour, please reach out to me and I can help you get that scheduled with Commander Roots, and they're happy to walk you through that. It was an experience of its own. I've never been there, which is a good thing, I guess. But to see what they're working with, and even what the sheriff's office is working with, it's clear that a facility is absolutely needed. Of course, it comes at a cost as well. But you can find more information out on their website if you're interested. One thing I also have in my manager's report is discussing a city council retreat. I think, we've tried to do them in the spring, we've tried to do them in the fall. Last time we did one in the fall. I think if we want to start finding a date that works for everyone, I think that'd be great to do that now. If we're looking at moving to maybe twice a year, then at the next retreat, we could plan the date at that retreat for the spring retreat. Getting those kind of set in stone is helpful when we want to kind of know the location and duration of those retreats. Often we've done it from like 9 to 3 or 9 to 4. I think if we do twice a year, we could even whittle that time down in the future. But having a retreat twice a year, I think, is important. One, with the new council members that may be elected, helps us get a retreat in early in spring, and then having one in the fall, it just breaks it up a bit as projects are moving forward. We can give more updates, or you also have time to meet. So what I am looking for right now is just, a head nod that we should start sending out a doodle poll to work on dates. Fall is a good time. Is there a preferred month from all of you? And then maybe not so much duration, but location. And are we looking at a Saturday? Are you wanting to do an evening thing? Just some discussion would be great to hear and give us a little bit of direction on that. But that is all I have for you this evening for that
Steve.
report.
I would say late October and late April would probably be times when the weather is kind of a little more unsettled around here, and be easier to get a Saturday in. I think it does call for a full day, at least for the first one anyway. Because the last one we didn't even finish going over everything before we were done. So my preference would be late October and for a full day.
Ben, preference?
Yeah, I think October, November sounds fine to me. I'm usually pretty flexible as long as I know it's coming. I don't care which day. So.
Rebecca, okay?
And Giuseppe said he agreed with Steve, so looks like that's good.
Can we see if he can say
Oh.
something? Jake asked if he could maybe relay that.
Can we test your mic, Giuseppe? Could you say something?
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Nope.
Test.
Nope.
Good try. Try it again. It's okay. Okay.
Anything else on that, Dana?
Not this evening.
Item C, consideration to direct city manager to negotiate a development agreement with Housing Whitefish to complete Depot Park
Okay.
Townhomes project, with such agreement presented to the city council for consideration at a future meeting.
Great. Good evening again. So I'm just going to do a little bit of background. Depot Park Townhomes has been a discussion of council for many years, really, but the specific project in June of 2020, the council passed a resolution and donated the property to the Housing Authority, which was commonly referred to as the Snow Lot, now the Depot Park Townhomes Project. The Housing Authority has been working on this project for the duration of those years. We're coming up on, well, I guess it would be 5 years now since that property was transferred. In the fall of 2021, we did have a request for additional funds from the city due to rising costs and a growing financial gap. We know that developing affordable housing in Whitefish is very costly. Both building supplies and interest rates have since gone up since 2021. Substantially. The council has committed a total of $2.9 million roughly with the additional donation of the land for the project. Currently, there's about $983,000 that is available of those funds to complete the project. You actually did approve the preliminary plat in December of 22 and then have recently approved the final plat for that project. There's been amendments to that agreement to address the term, to address the funding, and to address some of the construction variances that were approved. The Whitefish Housing Authority is required to complete the project by May 21st of 2027 in accordance with our current agreement. While generally that seems like an achievable deadline with the final plat already completed, there have been some unforeseen barriers with the Housing Authority, really making it impossible to meet. But aside from turnover and limited staffing, there has been a recent jury verdict that's resulted in a judgment against the Housing Authority. And to be able to finance this project cost efficiently and timely, we have concerns that that will be able to be done. And so we've been speaking with the executive or acting. Are you acting? Are you official? You're still acting. Okay. Acting executive director, Risk Getz, and well, they've worked diligently to try to find a solution. They've determined, as the Housing Authority, the board has, that it's in the best interest that this project be transferred back to the city. So we received that notification and immediately tried to work with Housing Whitefish to see if they would be willing to take on the development of this project to get it to completion. And they took time, and I appreciate their due diligence in looking at the financials and what was remaining of the project, as well as the funding remaining, to see if they could complete it. They have proposed provided a proposal to complete the project, if council is interested. Staff still has some work to do to make sure that this transfer of property and the equipment, oh my goodness, sorry, I just saw the TV turn off. I was like thinking equipment. The transfer of the property comes to Housing Whitefish with no strings attached. In other words, that the judgment that's against the Housing Authority would not be in effect if we transfer that property. So know that we still have some research and due diligence on our part to do before this agreement is drafted, but it would be part of the agreement drafting to make sure that that is the case. So currently with the proposal, there's no new financial requirements for the city. We would draft an agreement that provides the remaining funds of the $2.9 million to allow Housing Whitefish to utilize that to complete the project. We've been talking to Housing Whitefish, not just for this project, but other projects on how to best utilize our resort tax for housing developments, affordable housing developments in the future, and looking at maybe using that as an interim financing option. Specifically, Alpenglow 2 is on hold at this point, and we do have funds dedicated for that project in our resort tax fund. And so how could we use that to reduce the financing costs of this project? That could be something that we explore as part of this agreement negotiation. That Housing Whitefish is looking to partner with the Northwest Montana Community Land Land Trust to utilize the ground lease method that has really been proven successful at the Trailview homes. And so we're excited to see this partnership. We appreciate everything that Housing Authority has done and the work that they've completed to date. But for this project to be completed in a timely manner, we are recommending the City Council provide direction to myself and staff to negotiate a new developers agreement with Housing Whitefish to complete the Depot Park Townhomes project, and you will have the opportunity to review that agreement and consider it at a future meeting. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Dana and Daniel, obviously, and Riss and Kim are all in the audience this evening, so. Steve?
Yeah, Dana, so tonight we would just be, I just want to clarify what we would be acting on tonight is just to give you the authority to negotiate a developer agreement with Housing Whitefish, and with the idea that you could come to some agreement, or it's still up in the air as to whether you could come to some agreement, or what?
Correct. So it would be to start that negotiation process. Like I said, we have some legal research that needs to be done, and confirming how that property needs to be held, whether the city holds the property, Housing Whitefish holds the property, Housing Authority holds the property, how that might work to ensure that judgment cannot be acted upon the property. And so with that in mind, we would be negotiating an agreement based on their proposal, Housing Whitefish's proposal, something that works for both the city and the Housing Whitefish.
Okay, thank you.
Rebecca?
Yep. How much money is available in the Alpenglow 2 budget to complete this then?
I'm sorry, I was reading Giuseppe's question. What was the question again?
We've already allocated money for Alpenglow 2 from resort tax, and I just was wondering what that budget was that we've already given for the Alpenglow or designated for that.
So we have $800,000 designated in the resort tax fund for Alpenglow 2. We do have some funds remaining in our community housing, affordable community housing fund as well.
Thanks.
Questions? Ben?
Giuseppe had a question. I'll read it and respond if that's okay. He asked, when it comes to transferring the Depot Park project to Housing Whitefish, my question is, why not go through an RFP? And we could do that, absolutely, and we considered that. One of the challenges that I think we'll run into and what we'll see is developer fees being a lot higher than the developer fees with Housing Whitefish, just given our relationship and their relationship with the Northwest Community Land Trust. We could issue an RFP to see what comes forward, so that's absolutely an option as well. But we wanted to see this project completed as soon as possible, given the deadline in the current agreement. And so we did negotiate, or we started discussions with Housing Whitefish initially.
Steve, question for Dana?
I have a question for Kim, actually.
Okay. Rebecca, first.
I have a question for Riss.
Yeah.
No. Oh.
Is the silent minority alive?
We can hear you.
Let there be light. Just a comment on that RFP. You know how adamantly against I was into what I call rushing decisions, and we're always behind the curve. Now it's been 9 years, and we need to finish this. We have a deadline. At the same time, my concern is why not stop, hit the pause button, even if it's only for 3 months, and do an RFP. And maybe there are competitive developers that will take this hot potato out of our hands, because that's what it is right now in my mind, and produce a product like a developer does. Whitefish Housing Authority is not a developer. Housing Whitefish is not a developer. The city of Whitefish is not a developer. And I'm concerned that although I trust that Daniel is a very strong professional, and I talked to him offline, I'm concerned that we're giving him and the organization an unfair hand without going through a process of public bidding. Thank you.
Rebecca, question for Riss?
Yeah, Russ, do you mind? Thank you for coming tonight. So there's some liability for the city now with the lien on the property, and also I wondered about the contracts. Haven't been informed that we have a written contract with the prior construction company, but I was wondering, okay, is there any risk to us with that? Like, is there any way that we could be sued if we proceeded with another builder? I mean, you don't feel like there's any risk to that at this point?
I don't think that's something that I personally am professionally able to comment on. I think that's something better to speak with Angie about.
Okay. All right. And thank you.
Steve, questions?
This is for you, Kim. Is this something you can afford as the land trust? Last time you were here, you said you were kind of thin on the cash side of things.
Well, actually, financially, the land trust is not committing to bring any funds. It is really Housing Whitefish that is coming forward to do the development.
Okay.
Where we would come in is at the end when you're actually ready to sell the houses.
Right.
And at that point, it is my hope that I will have had a year or more to plan for that. And I would be able, if it was necessary, to bring down the purchase price for people at a lower AMI, that we would have done the proper planning and have those funds in place. Specifically, there are something that we've used in Trailview in the past, home buyers assistance funds, where you can use up to $90,000 per house for people below 80% AMI. Okay. And I think with a project that's very specific, my ability to fundraise is pretty good. But it would really, how much we brought per house to the project would really depend on the AMI of the people buying the house.
Gotcha. Okay. That's how you always operate, is you wait till something's built and then you buy the land underneath?
Yes,
You wouldn't purchase the land, for example,
No.
now and then?
And actually, it's to all of our benefit for us to not own the land until the home is sold. Those home buyers assistance funds wouldn't be available to us if we already own the land. It would only with us coming in at the last step would we be able to bring those funds to the project.
Okay, and you think with a year in a specific project, you'd be pretty good about?
I've already started.
Okay,
yeah.
all right, great.
So,
Thank you, Kim.
you bet.
I guess I just have a couple of comments, and to Giuseppe's point, which he's made all along the way with this process. You know, in part, I kind of agree with him at this point, because we've gone from a $6.6 million cost now to a $12.3 million cost in 5 years. We've gone from $5.6 million in revenue to $9.5 million now we've got to sell all this for, which starts to really push the barriers of affordability, I'm afraid. And obviously, not like we have a whole ton more money that we can come to the plate with. So, I mean, I think it is a bit of a valid question at this point now, is do we retrench and look at potentially more density on that site to make it a little more affordable? I mean, is that something, again, I would want us to look at equity housing, not something that would be a rental property. Now, my biggest concern with doing that, though, is we did go through a rather lengthy neighborhood process to come up with a design, and that was not easily achieved. And that's, I weigh that in my head, and I don't have a good answer to that question. I don't know, I'm just throwing that thought out there, I guess.
one of,
Yeah, I agree that it seems like we need to hit the reset button in a lot of different ways. I do think that transferring this over to Daniel and Whitefish Housing Authority is really similar to that. We've already spent, how much money have we spent on getting to final plat? We've spent over $1 million.
$2 million.
Right? Yeah, we spent $2 million getting to final plat, which if we go back out and change all that, we have no, that money's just gone. And I can't think of a single developer that's going to come in and build something there and be able to sell it affordably. Developers don't do that. I mean, if we want to hit the reset button, we should try to get as much revenue off of it as we possibly can, which would not be an affordable project. And I think that our best chance at getting any sort of affordability in that spot in downtown is going to be up. Daniel is our best bet at this point. Daniel and having Kim come in after things are built to help lower the price. But having an RFP for developers to come in and tell us that they can build it, but it's not going to be affordable, I think is just a further waste of time, to be honest. But that's just my opinion.
But you can cage, first of all, point of order. Are we discussing without emotion, or this is like a work session because it's direction to the staff? I thought we were at questions time, but I can discuss if we can. Yeah, Lucy?
I would move to direct the city manager to negotiate a developer agreement with Housing Whitefish to complete the Depot Park Townhomes project.
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion. Rebecca?
Yeah, I will not be voting for this tonight. I think there's too many issues that are still outstanding legally that we don't know the answers to, and I don't know. If they take this on, I want them to be successful. And also because it means we're not going to get an Elk Bungalow 2 anytime soon if we're diverting funds away. But there's some pretty big legal hurdles that we have to figure out that I talked to Angie about, not to mention how the lien on the property affects future homeowners, but the city, the land trust, we just need to know those things, I think, before we encumber anybody that we don't intend to. And then I do think Andy's right. I think it's been through so much that it would behoove us to take a little bit of time just to look at what has really happened and what could still happen there. So I'm very thankful that Housing Whitefish has decided to move forward, because we've actually had discussions with them for at least a year or two about taking the project on when it became difficult for Whitefish Housing Authority to complete it. But I think it's so much money. It's like $4 million of city funds that we've given, that we should take a little time, like at least a work session, to discuss where we're at legally, and also make sure that all of those legal issues are cleared up before we proceed and make it worse. So I won't be voting for this tonight.
May I, Andy?
Yes, Giuseppe.
Thank you. So, to Steve's point, 3.5 years ago, the Whitefish Housing Authority was our best bet. And now we're saying that Housing Whitefish is our best bet. I'm not afraid. I wouldn't be concerned about putting a request for proposal out there, caging the terms, and if Housing Whitefish is the only one who bids, or the one that wins a number of bids, I would be perfectly happy and satisfied by the right process. So, sorry, I'm still here. So, why not considering And by the way, Steve, if you say no developer would build it affordable, nobody would build it, period. I mean, you have developers that can build affordable structures. So for this reason, tonight I would vote against it.
Andy, I
Yeah, go
wonder-
ahead, Steve. I
Oh,
was trying
sorry.
to see if Giuseppe was done.
Oh, that's okay.
I was waiting for that painful pause.
Okay. Sorry. I wonder, Ben, if you would be interested in withdrawing your motion and have us postpone this until two weeks from now when we have a full council here. This is a really important project that we started a long time ago that seems like if there's some disagreement among the five of us, that it would be best to have the full council here to vote on this, whether we negotiate, whether we direct Dana to negotiate a contract.
I mean, if the motion fails, we can postpone, right? Or what would happen if the motion fails?
It's just direction, so
direction.
probably. I mean, you're just giving me direction. Either I'm gonna do this as a project or not. I mean, that's really where it's coming down to. I mean, you can direct me to do an RFP, you can direct me to negotiate a contract. This isn't like a real actionable, it's just giving me direction on what do you want me to do to get Depot Park Townhomes done? And that's the direction I'm seeking, because otherwise I'm not working on it. I have other city council goals I'm working on. So that's kind of the thing is if you want this a priority, you got to tell me what you want me to do to make it a priority on my desk and Angie's.
Would it hurt to wait 2 weeks to find out from the whole council about whether or not?
That doesn't hurt me any. It just delays the project. And just to keep
I
in mind
understand.
with the comments about wanting more density, the infrastructure is in. You can't change density at this point. I mean, that's the challenge with the layout that you have now. So,
I'll make her-
yeah.
Can I ask you one more question, Dana? Through the process of this negotiation, obviously you wouldn't enter into a contract with housing Whitefish if the legal side of it doesn't work
Correct.
out, right?
Correct. Yes.
Those things will all be cleared up in this negotiation process, right?
Correct.
It's not like we're saying, we're not directing you to hand it over to Daniel tonight. We're directing you
No.
to.
We will have all those answers done, and the contract the agreement would come back to council to even consider approving it. So it's just to get us working on it, and that you generally like housing Whitefish's proposal, working with the land trusts, et cetera, and how they're going to somewhat phase just the construction side of it, 4 to 6 to get those sold, do another 4 to 6. And so that would just be, we would get through all the legal questions. We would not create an agreement if we didn't know who should hold the land and how that land would be impacted.
Okay, thank you.
Ben, yeah.
All right. The long and difficult history of the snow lot continues. So I made the motion to go ahead and direct the city manager to proceed as is proposed here, and I still believe that's the right thing to do, and I think it's the right thing to do now. So let me explain why. I heard 3 objections. One is to revisit the design. One is for RFPs to get the either lowest cost or best possible organization to take it on, and the third is the legal issues. So I'm going to go through these one by one. As far as the design goes, it would be insanely difficult to try to change this project at this point. There are pipes in the ground. There is millions of dollars spent on design fees, engineering, entitlements. I mean, it would be an enormous economic loss to just try. Not only that, you have to redo it and tear it out of the ground. It makes no sense at all. I just think that this project went through years and years and years of visioning. I do not see a scenario where we're going to go back and change this project. It just does not make any sense. And so as far as I'm concerned, I do not think there's any reason to delay the project for that reason. The second concern that was brought up had to do with an RFP to find the best organization necessary to continue the development of the project. But I just want to point out one thing about this project is, when we talk about what is real estate development, a lot of the real estate development is already done. This is now principally a building project. It's entitled, the lots are done, they're ready to go. I mean, I'm sure there's a few other things to deal with, but for the most part, we're hiring a construction contractor to go vertical now. And there's a lot of very well-qualified GCs, I'm sure, who will hopefully be interested in this project. I'm sure that Daniel is, and his board are able to choose a good one. I just don't think that there's a lot of benefit that we would see by trying to find a different real estate developer. And more fundamentally, I mean, I've asked for years, how come Housing Whitefish wasn't developing this project starting several years ago? I mean, that's what the whole organization was created to do. And to come here to this point and say, no, we want to have somebody else develop this project, I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think that we need Housing Whitefish to stand on their own 2 feet. I think they've got a great board and great staff that are already doing good things. I think we owe them the shot at this. I think they will know how important this is to our community. And I think that this thing is so far along at this point that I just think a lot of the really difficult and technical parts of this project are already completed. It's designed, it's engineered, it's budgeted, it's entitled, there's pipes and roads. I mean, it's already there. And so I think Housing Whitefish should easily be able to finish this project. And then the third objection is legal issues. And I don't know exactly what the solutions to legal issues are, but I do know that these liens and things like this happen all the time in real estate development. And there's solutions to it out there. I'm sure that they will work out a way to, I think Housing Whitefish's request to transfer this property with no strings attached is a fair request. I am sure that there are ways to accomplish that. I know Angie and other attorneys that would possibly be working on this will find a way through that, and whatever that solution is something that would likely come back here in some form or another at some point anyway. So we'll talk about it again when that solution is here, but none of that can even happen until we direct the city manager to move forward, at least with some sort of a negotiation about a contract here. And so this project has gone on forever. And by the way, I also would be remiss to say, Daniel, thank you very much for being willing to take, and to your board, for being willing to take this on. I think this is very important. I know it's got a thorny past, but I still believe it's a good project, and I still believe there's a lot of success to be had here. And while I'm very frustrated with how we got here, I think that it is literally to the point of just get a contractor in there to build it, and it's actually very hard to get there. So, we've been here forever. In my opinion, this is the only option right now that makes sense. And I think that we've waited so long. Let's just get this done. Let's move this forward. And I want to thank everybody who's willing to take this thing to the finish line. So that's my opinion. I feel like if the motion fails, then we can just revisit it next time.
No, I'm going to speak. I made those exact same notes, and I asked my question so we could get this kind of debate and some thoughtful look at it. And if you actually take a look at it, I mean, if you look at the economic loss alone, in 5 years, the cost has gone up $95,000 each month. Every 30 days, this project costs another $95,000. Now, we're probably past that giant inflationary period in building, hopefully, but with tariffs and everything else, who knows? I mean, we may see similar. So every month we delay, that's another $95,000 possibly, and we have several $1 million pointed in one direction, and it's been pointed in one direction for 5 years now, and Ben's right on the money when he says this is no longer a development project, it's a building project, and that's exactly right. If we had no infrastructure in the ground and we spent no money on engineering and spent no money on design, I could possibly be swayed to look at this differently, but at this point, No, and the other thing that is important to me is it was a fight with the neighborhood to come up with a project that was palatable to them. And I think that we do owe that neighborhood, and I'm assuming that's a lot of the same people that still live along the street that are going to look at it. And if we would suddenly change and go back, I guarantee you this room is going to be filled every night that we talk about it. And it's going to be filled with people that are really upset with us, and I would be upset if I lived there. And I think to Rebecca's point about the legal issues, all we're doing is directing Dana right now is to negotiate a contract, and Daniel's smart enough out there to know that he's not going to sign on to something that's a ginormous liability to him, and we as a city would not put him in that position. So legal issues will sort themselves out over time, and I don't think there's something to be concerned with us, so therefore I will be supporting the motion. Rebecca?
Okay, so the legal challenges, and Angie, are you okay with me addressing that? Or should I ask you about it? Because I can explain why I'm very concerned about proceeding without taking a little bit of time.
I can probably discuss the legal issues, Rebecca, and then you can add to it if you want. As you folks know, there was a $1.5 million jury verdict against the Whitefish Housing Authority in State District Court. A judgment lien attaches to property owned by the WHA, and so there is a $1.5 million judgment lien on that property right now. My understanding is that and correct me if I'm wrong, please, Russ, that the Housing Authority has appealed that jury verdict to the Montana Supreme Court. Am I right? Okay. So that is one aspect of it. I don't know what the Montana Supreme Court will do with it. I will say that jury verdicts are often very hard to get flipped. The Montana Supreme Court tends to give deference to what a jury awards. That said, it has happened. I've had it happen. So I think we're going to have to wait till that kind of sorts out before we really know what the effect of this 1.5 million judgment lien is. The other aspect of the case is that the insurance company, I believe, has sued the Whitefish Housing Authority. The insurance company provided a defense only of the action. They do not think they're on the hook to offer indemnity, in other words, to pay for the $1.5 million judgment. They're relying on some exemptions, some exclusions in their policy. So my understanding is that's proceeding in federal court. I don't see it being a jury trial. Generally speaking, it's probably summary judgment motions to see if the insurance company has to pay the $1.5 million judgment. I don't know if I haven't talked to Sean. I didn't get a chance to talk to him today about the status. I don't know if they agreed to stay the federal proceeding until the Montana Supreme Court comes down with a decision or not. So those are kind of a couple, I think, of the legal issues. That's really just a $1.5 million judgment lien. The housing authority itself is exempt from having its property basically levied on. As a city, if we were to hold it, we would likely be exempt as well. In other words, they couldn't go in and sell the property if the city owns it. So there's definitely some, I think, legal issues that need to be worked out. I certainly want to speak with Kim or with Kim's counsel to see how a judgment lien, if it weren't satisfied, would affect the land trust. So those are just kind of the rundown of the issues. As far as when the Montana Supreme Court ruled, depends on when they're done briefing it, but they have been, at least in the past 4 or 5 years, I found fairly responsive, and they get decisions out pretty quickly. So those are kind of the issues that I see right now. Happy to answer any questions you may have, but I don't know that I have all the answers yet either.
Rebecca?
Yeah, so I guess to summarize, the concern is there is a $1.5 million lien on the property. We think Whitefish Housing Authority is exempt. Once it transfers to the city, we believe the city is also exempt because we're a government entity. What we don't know is whether or not the Northwest, the Land Trust has the same exemption status. So what we don't also know is if these get built and the lien remains on the property and no other remedy comes through in terms of the insurance company being mandated to pay that $1.5 million, would the person that put the lien on the property have the right to some of these units? Or would it prohibit selling the units? Or would it mean that we have to sell the land? And so I think it's just like everything else on this project. It's kind of like we're moving forward, but I also don't want the Housing Whitefish to put so much effort in before we know some of this, because if it doesn't turn out like we're hoping, where the insurance company will hopefully pay the fine, that somehow this land has to pay for the fine, you know? And so I just feel like it's a very serious legal challenge that we might try to get more information before we impose this on Housing Whitefish or the Land Trust, just so that everybody is very clear about how we're going to build it, because we still also don't know about the construction loan and the feasibility of getting additional money. So, but that's my opinion. I just am feeling like we should take a couple weeks, maybe.
One additional question.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Hearing all that, Dana, would all of those things be addressed in whatever negotiation you have with Whitefish, Housing Whitefish?
Yes.
Okay. So there'd be some sort of accommodation in whatever negotiations you have for any of these contingencies, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We would not transfer land to Housing Whitefish if we thought that land was at risk.
Okay. And again, this is, all we're doing is directing you to negotiate with them.
Correct. As we wait for whatever legal, opinions and or action has to be taken, we will have that draft ready to go, and then we can bring it to you when the time is right. But it gives us direction to start working with Housing Whitefish.
Yeah, I just would suggest, Rebecca, that our action tonight is not signing a deal with anybody. All our direction is tonight is to Dana to negotiate with Housing Whitefish to see if we can come up with a solution to get the project built. Legal issues will sort themselves out over time. Any further comments?
Yes, Andy and colleagues. I am not envisioning any change of the project. We are where we are, and I agree with Ben. The only question I have is why not go through the public bidding process? And most probably, Housing Whitefish would be the only bidder, and most probably they will win it. But what's our concern about giving direction to our staff to design the agreement in a way that could be bid publicly, give whatever the public limit term is, and go through the bidding process like every public body does. I have no problem, and I want for Housing Whitefish to be successful, but why not do it through the bidding process? That's my only question.
Any new information or questions I would entertain?
Only that I agree with Giuseppe that I think it would be useful to open the bidding process.
Further discussion? All is in favor? All is opposed? That would be Giuseppe and Rebecca. Motion does carry on a 3-2 vote. Item D, now that we've had a long discussion. Consideration to direct staff and Community Development Board to ensure the timeline prepared for growth policy update is adhered to and carefully considered by all bodies participating in this process, page 175 on your program.
All right. As you know, on page 175, you have my staff report. The City Council assigned the Community Development Board as the responsible party for working with city staff to update the city's 2007 growth policy. This is now named Vision Whitefish 2045, and it's the first step in coming into compliance with MLUPA, the Montana Land Use Planning Act, which was established in the 2023 legislative session. We did recently hold a work session with council on June 2nd for an update with planning staff to learn about the process to date. But I wanted to make it very clear to council the timeline that we're under, because I think this is being forgotten at multiple levels. Statutorily, the city is required to meet all requirements of MLUPA by May 18th, 2026. That includes the updated land use plan, as well as implementing the zoning and subdivision requirements or regulations. So additionally, there is a change that staff will proceed with at some point this fall to update the Community Development Board to review that board to make sure it's in compliance with MLUPA, and we'll likely be retitling it to Planning Commission because that's what it's called in MLUPA. We had created this board based on the legislation that was available to us at that time, and now they now title it Planning Commission. So, but the big part of this is just the timeline that's attached to my report. We've laid out, and Alan's done a fantastic job of keeping this on track with scheduling when the Community Development Board work sessions would be, what the topic would be to ensure all the chapters are completed. But we really need the Community Development Board to work more efficiently, and they will be required to hold additional meetings for certain chapters. Housing and land use are coming up. Those are going to be our most difficult chapters, but we've already seen a challenge in keeping with the timeline that we've created. So based on our attached timeline, we're suggesting that council direct the Community Development Board that if a topic or a chapter that is scheduled to be discussed and reviewed is not completed at their monthly work session, that they should be required to hold an additional work session within that month or within a week or so of that to finish that discussion. It is the only way that I see us being able to get to completion by the required statutory deadline. So why the deadline? We understand that this is a very important process that requires a lot of public input, but the Community Development Board has held monthly meetings. It could have been bi-monthly meetings, it could have been more frequent, but staff does need time to complete the chapters and have that information ready. Because the discussions have been going beyond one work session, it's pushing other topics back. If we do not meet this deadline, and the importance of meeting it is that we'll certainly be at risk for litigation from developers. Starting May 18th, we should be approving developments under MLUPA. And so I don't want to say that this is just a deadline set by the state. There are risks for the city legally, as well as our funding for the pro-housing grant could be retracted. Right now we've been awarded $391,000 roughly. So there's no financial commitment. We could face a budget shortfall if we don't meet that deadline, and the pro-housing grant funds are retracted based on our not completing by the deadline, which is actually being set aside to have consulting help for the land use chapter, our community wildfire protection plan. So staff, I think we're just looking for council support and direction to both staff and the Community Development Board to ensure this timeline as prepared is adhered to and considered by all parties, including council, because we will, as you heard from Dave during our goal setting session, we hope to have this plan completed by February so that you'll start to see the zoning come in before May. That means that it's coming to you ideally, I think it's in January, and it's within that timeline for your consideration. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Alan's here. Dave can also answer questions as well, and Angie, but we would really like the direction of council that this is the scheduled work program, and if topics are pushed, they have to hold an additional meeting.
Steve.
I'll let Ben go first.
Oh, Ben.
So this is kind of a scary looking timeline to me. Is it realistic? Can we accomplish the housing and land use element in 2 months?
We're anticipating they'll be scheduled to hold, whether it's weekly or bi-weekly, they'll be holding more frequent meetings for those 2 months.
Okay. And so then the timeline part that says December to January, that's the council's public hearings? Where's the council in this?
The council public hearings are in February 2nd and 17th.
Okay. So we have 2 meetings to decide on the entire document?
Correct, and you would have a work session January 5th as well, and it looks, yes, I believe, Ellen, we had it planned that there would be work sessions on the draft. I think we have it January 5th and January 20th, and then you'd have 2 public hearings.
Got it. So everything from January on, that is all city council?
That's for city council.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
I believe.
we will have at least 2 work sessions, at least 2 public hearings. Oh, yeah. And then adoption.
Correct. Yeah, city council's in the far right column, what your schedule looks
Oh,
like.
I got it.
Community development
Okay.
board's in the first
Thank you.
column,
I
what
missed
their
that part.
schedule is, because they'll start working on zoning and subdivision in January.
Steve?
A little bit to your point, Ben. Ideally, you have a well-functioning board that addresses most of the issues that we would have to address when we get the draft. Unfortunately, it hasn't really worked out that way. And I've been trying to say that for a while, and I appreciate that you're coming up with these rules now, because it's been, as you know, it's been quite frustrating for me being on that board. And none of us were envisioning this to work this way. My question about this, about what the rules in here, it seems to me that there needs to be some sort of greater direction to the members of the Community Development Board, because there are a couple in particular who bring things up, either miss a meeting and the board votes to move forward, and then a whole bunch of stuff comes up later that requires the board to go back and address things they've already voted on. That happened starting last summer. And I just wonder if there needs to be some additional direction in here to the members of that board, that once there's a final vote on a section, you don't get to add more comments until you get to the end, and then you can try to, if you want to insert something when you get to the end. Because the problem is that this process, the way that the process hasn't worked and why it hasn't worked, is that nothing has ever been finished. It's been, we voted on that, but now we're talking about it. You're submitting 5 pages of comments on this thing that's already been voted on and moved forward by the board. And people miss meetings, and they miss whole sections, and then they come back with comments and suggestions that then Alan has to deal with. And I don't think it's fair to staff members, for one, because Alan is pulling what's left of his hair out. And you do have a nice head of hair, though. But that part is extremely unfair. And that's one of the things I was trying to guide the members of the board towards while I was there. And to me, that's why we're in the position we're in currently. So my question to you is, should there be some greater guidance to, or at least a sentence or a paragraph that says, once something has been voted on and moved forward, do not submit further comments. Hold your comments potentially until we get to the end. And I don't know, it just, because we're not addressing the things that are on the agenda of that night. We were constantly reviewing things that had already come up and been done before.
And my hope is that, well, one, we can meet with the chair, and I think Frank was planning to, because he's now on planning board, and we had met with him, Frank and John, prior when we discussed coming up with this plan. So my hope is Frank relays that to members of that community development board. I'm happy to meet with the chair and discuss it based on your direction tonight. But what I'm hopeful is the requirement that they hold another meeting to bring up the topic again will dissuade people from wanting to reopen those conversations. If they want to hold multiple meetings, then they can, but I don't think that group wants to have more frequent meetings. Otherwise, they would have already done that, in my
My guess is
opinion.
they just won't show up if there's another meeting.
And if they
what are
don't
the
show up
notice
and they don't have a
requirements?
quorum, then they don't get to meet, and so they don't get to discuss that at that point then.
What if they haven't voted on the section yet? I mean, this is where we get into,
So they've created, now they're moving to what, instead of holding it like a work session, they're holding it as a meeting, which I thought all along it was the same thing, but they, in their view, they were not holding a meeting where they were voting. So I believe, Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, but they are now trying to treat the meetings as an official meeting where they're actually making an official vote. Once that's done, you don't go back until the very end. And so I can, again, have conversation with the chair to help her through this process.
and has anybody met with the individual members that are the ones that are kind of bringing stuff back from the dead continuously?
I think we have all tried to, in some way, say to that individual, there's a better way to do this, but he's not willing to take feedback.
Yeah, and some of the other board members have offered to work with that individual to try to make his comments more, concise and timely. So we'll see. I think that the board's aware of it, and they actually haven't voted on who's the chair and the vice chair yet. So, but
My other question is, are there any meeting requirements, like notice requirements that we'd be bumping up against? If, they don't get something done 1 week, can they have a meeting the next week, or do they have to wait 2 weeks?
Yeah, it's a 48-hour notice, similar to the city council.
Okay, all right. And what you said, Dave, though, is, I heard we are hoping a couple different times, and that's why I don't like to hope that this is going to get done. I would like there to be clear direction about the steps people need to take and what they need to adhere to. I'm a little concerned that this is still a little loose, like, okay, well, if we don't get it done, we got to come back next week if I can make it. And I don't know that that's, I'm worried that might not work. But I do appreciate the fact that you have brought this forward and we're discussing it at least.
Comments, questions? Rebecca?
I just, the only thing, I think it's good that we have a timeline so people know that we have to get this done when we need it done. But the only thing I was thinking after looking at this was those visioning sessions were really fun and really well attended and out in the community. And I was hoping that we had a plan to actually do something like that again, but it doesn't look like there's any public outreach into the community other than people coming here. And Alan's going, I don't want to do it again, but you did such a great job, Alan. Come on up if you want to. But I really think it was nice because people were with their neighborhoods. There was a lot of discussion about what they loved about their neighborhoods. Alan took copious notes and kept every little scrap of paper. And I just feel like some of the process of inclusion is kind of because people have to come here and it's so serious. And I wondered where in this we'll be doing some outreach.
Monty from Bach Long Range Planner. First, real quickly, I want to address Steve's. One thing we didn't comment on, which I think we had discussed, was the possibility of having a standing rule that if they did not finish whatever it was, that it was going to be deemed approved at the end of the month. I think we had said, regardless of what the conversations were, if they didn't get through the topic, it was going to be deemed approved or done. So that's, one thing, is you can argue all you want, but if you're not done on the 30th, then we're deeming it you're done until it comes to the council. So that was one thing. In regard to the visioning, so I'm finishing up the transportation section. I'm getting ready to start on the housing. We got an RFP that's going out or has gone out for the land use. That RFP for the land use has some pretty extensive requirements for public outreach. So it's not in the schedule because we don't know yet, because we're waiting on a consultant to offer what those dates are. The hope is that, I mean, it's a fast timeline. I mean, there's, it's extremely frustrating that it's been 2 years to get us here. And I keep asking myself what I could be doing better, and I don't know. So I'm doing the best I can. The hope is that in August we can start moving with a consultant. And then the hope is by the early winter, we can start having the land use drafts go to the Community Development Board. Now, there could be some overlap, right? The zoning, if you look at the calendar, the zoning is coming to you in February, Dana, is that right? There would be discussing zoning. The Community Development Board will start having work sessions in zoning, I think, in December and January. So there could be some overlap where we're working on the zoning and the land use at the same time. I'm somewhat skeptical it's going to be done by October. I think we still have the time to get it done by December and January and getting it to you. I think we're going to be having multiple topics going at the same time. And now I'm speaking for me, okay? I think we're going to have multiple topics at the same time. I don't think it's realistic that we're going to have a complete packet all bandaged up and ready to go. I think that we might be at the point where we're having to adopt drafts that meet the requirements of the state statute to get us to where we need to be. And then after the fact, we can go back and pretty everything up and compile it all together. That's what I think. Maybe they can stop me if I'm wrong, but I think that's where we're going to be.
Yeah, Rebecca, I agree on the visioning part of it, but we're kind of getting to the point where focus is going to be really important, and visioning is this, and then we need to be like here given our timeline. That's the only thing I'm concerned about. But if we're going to go through that with the land use elements, then we'll have an opportunity to do that hopefully for people. So, but at some point, people have to come in here and we have to vote up or down. I mean, and we're getting close to that point. So I think that's the whole purpose of what we're discussing here. So.
I don't like this timeline, and I don't like the concept of rushing this process. But I look at this and I say the timeline is what it is, right? I mean, what are you going to change on this? I mean, we have that deadline of May, whatever it is, to have all of that finished, and you've got every week mapped out. And so I think we have to be on that timeline, essentially. And so I think that direction needs to happen. I think Alan's point that if they can't reach an agreement on a certain issue by a certain time frame, that maybe it comes without a recommendation or something. I think I don't like that, but maybe that's an option if we have to, but let's try not to do that. So in my opinion, I think we should direct accounts or direct staff to stick to the schedule, because I don't think we have any other choice. And I think it comes with a message to the planning board. We appreciate everything. Buckle up for the ride, and we hope you can really focus on this for the next 6 months, because that's what it's going to take.
Steve? So Alan, is that what you said, if it's not done, it's just approved? If they're not done, it's just approved. Is that a standing sort of?
I mean, there's still going to have to be a public hearing for them to send it to you guys with a recommendation when it's generally complete.
No, Alan said that if there's a section that's not done by the end of the month or whatever, it's just assumed that it's approved as is.
I mean, that'd be the draft form. I mean, they obviously,
The
you
draft,
guys could
yeah,
tell them
I
to
mean,
do
I
that, but
get
at
it.
some point, the entire package is going to have a public hearing
Sure.
before the Community Development Board, and they're going to have to make a recommendation to forward it to you guys. And I mean, having this timeline at least set some parameters. In the past, we gave them a timeline, but they keep backtracking, and we're 4 months behind what our timeline was now. So
I understand that. What Alan said was that, and my experience was that we would get to a certain point and everybody would say, let's talk about this next time because there's too much or something like that. And what Alan just said is that doesn't work anymore. If it's too much, it just gets
Well, that's
Or it
something we
doesn't- It moves
discussed.
on without approval.
We discussed that
And-
as staff. I think that that's something the council could give direction to as part of this, that, hey, if you're not done talking about it at the end of the month, then
Okay,
that
that's
draft's
what I was
coming
trying to
forward.
get at. Is that something that the board knows, or is that something we need to add into
Just
this
talked about that
document?
as we put this memo together and,
Okay,
and
'cause
talked
I
to the
think-
mayor.
I think maybe some additional incentive for them to finish their discussion would be to add something like that in here that says any topic that has not been voted on or not complete at the end of whatever the time period is just deemed, it goes forward without an approval, and we don't go back and talk about it again until you get to the end when you're talking about the whole package. Is that something you think we need to add, Dana?
I think that'd be a good thing to add, yeah.
Okay. That's something we could stomach from council?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Just,
Sorry.
Giuseppe, comment?
Just
Oh, okay, thumbs up?
No, now that I can speak, just, I fully agree with the sentiment of Steve, and I also feel under pressure, as Ben has expressed. I was one of the first ones with Steve to try to move actually public opinion. I wrote a couple of messages out, op-eds, and I actually reached out to 3 board members, but they ghost me. So I would fail on Tinder if I were to work that way. I'm frustrated and sad about that. But long story short, I support on this process. It's clearly defined that the staff is the one working the process. So I would trust what Alan and Dana come up with, given that it's in the purview of the MCA and our authority over the Community Development Board. I would execute exactly what they're asking us to do. Thank you.
Further comments, Rebecca?
I've been to a few of these meetings, and I just want to commend everybody for having patience with the process. I think everybody on the Community Development Board is really hardworking and very committed to getting this done. And I think our community really cares about our community. And so sometimes when big things like this come up, it's hard because there's a lot of opinions and different ways of doing things. But I'm positive we'll get it done in time. I just think it's important that the staff reminds the board that we have to get it done. And that because we can't afford to go backwards, we're going to make some changes about how we facilitate the meetings and that kind of stuff. So I don't want the board to think that we don't appreciate their efforts, because they work very hard on our behalf, just like Alan has and Dave has too. So thank you.
Andy, just.
Dana, would you, go ahead.
Could I just add one thing real quick? And the reason we're coming to you is at a board meeting previously, I had told them the date that it needed to be completed. And the board's reaction was, it's money. This is more important than the money we're getting. But it's not just money. There's potential legal ramifications and legal risks. So this will be very helpful for staff if the council is saying, no, that is our deadline. Staff is not just telling you it needs to be done because of money or because of state law. We expect it to be done, so, or to you in this timeline. So, sorry, Andy, to interrupt you.
Well, I was going to ask you if we just needed a nod of heads or a motion, but after having said that, I will say let's have a motion, and I would entertain a motion now for the approval of the Vision Whitefish 2045 work session program.
So moved.
Yep. Steve?
So moved.
Second. Moved by Steve, seconded by Ben. Steve?
Just like to add, and I don't know if we need to come up with the language right now, but if you could add that clause in there. Oops, I just turned it off, sorry. I would just add, if you could add in there what we just talked about in terms of things moving forward, no matter whether, if they don't get to it, it moves forward anyway.
To the final draft, okay.
Is that, I don't know if that needs to be a friendly amendment or.
I support that change. And just as a semantic thing, can we say it's moving forward without a recommendation, not it's approved?
Sure.
Yeah.
It'll move forward to their, when they do the public hearing on the completed draft. So they will still have an opportunity, but at least that will make sure we get them a completed draft by that deadline in our work plan.
Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor? All those opposed, like sign. Motion does carry unanimously. Are you done, Dana?
I think so.
Are you over it now?
A little rough after a 3-day weekend,
Okay,
holiday weekend.
all right. That puts us on to us, which is communications from the mayor and city councilors. It won't be from the mayor or the deputy mayor because they're not here, but we'll start with Giuseppe. Normally, we usually do that, but you're looking at me, so I'll say Giuseppe. Any comments?
Yes. Yes, I have a very short comment. I want to thank you all for your patience with me participating remotely. And I want to thank all the Jakes of the world and the Chris and the IT people of the world. They're doing an amazing job. I actually see that now they're editing the video, so when one of us speaks remotely, gets the stage. So there is no need to say to me, be patient, or thank you for your patience. I'm thankful to be able to attend remotely, and so good job, everybody there. Thank you.
Thanks, Giuseppe. Steve?
Yeah, just want to wish everybody a happy July. It's nice that it's summer. Town has changed quite a bit. And I think Maria would be the person to ask this question, but for me to ask this question too. But I noticed on Caro they planted fruiting trees, serviceberry trees. Is that something that we would be planting?
So the tree selection on Caro was made by the tree committee. I can't answer that question.
Okay, all right.
It
Rebecca
was,
can-
the trees that were planted were intended to be planted, I guess, is the answer to your question.
I certainly get that, yes. It wasn't by accident, but go ahead, Rebecca.
That's okay, Andy, for me to answer here?
Yeah, go ahead,
Okay.
Rebecca. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was actually a discussion when we walked Caro about the attracting of deers from the golf course over. So none of the trees are fruit-bearing. They're not going to be fruit-bearing,
So they're non-fruit-bearing serviceberry trees?
I guess. Are you
'Cause
sure it's a serviceberry?
It said very clearly on this, when they were planting it, what it was. They planted at least 3 or 4
Yeah, no,
of them.
we actually had that discussion because people didn't, it's a busy thoroughfare and we didn't want to have anything that was going to attract deer. So hopefully,
Okay.
there's a lot of different species of
Yeah.
trees.
Okay. And that's all I have. Oh, I just wanted to apologize for my lack of attendance in June. You know, I'm at that time of life where my mom is aging out, and it was really, I had to make a decision whether I was going to rush back and get to the meeting or just spend time with my mom and my kids. So that's what I did. I missed the vote on counselor pay, counselor compensation. I apologize for that, but there was a good reason for it, so.
Rebecca? As long as,
No comments tonight, thanks.
Ben?
No further comments.
Just a couple of comments. I say this every year, this time of year. I just wish pedestrians downtown would realize that it's not Main Street and Disneyland, and walking with your very young children out from behind in the middle of the block on a diagonally parked road with your young children without looking either direction is really dangerous. It's just, I've seen so many people almost get run over. It's just frightening, so I wouldn't do that. I have to say, it doesn't look like it's a lot of difference, but the viaduct really does look different. It just looks so much more friendly to people on bikes and families with strollers and people walking, and the landscaping that's going in and the parking on the southwest corner there is really nice. And I think when all said and done, we're going to be pretty happy we did that. Sorry, Giuseppe, I just had to say that for your benefit. Oh, I love you too. And thank you, Giuseppe, for attending remotely and, you know, working through all of our little things. Again, I apologize for any errors, omissions, or miscues tonight. A little rusty, but hopefully I won't have to be sitting up here anytime in the near future. And on that, we are adjourned. It did get a little warm in here, yeah.
honestly think everybody should have to take a turn on the planning board. It's just not.
I watched it twice.
No idea.
I was killing time.
Another person on line of sense, G-Man.